Hi, everybody. Jonah here with Jonah Petty John Missions, and welcome back to another weekly devotional. I'm happy to have you here. Glad that you tuned in today. Last week, I did what I thought was a one-off video where I shared some testimonies about the way that the Lord had provided for some of the things that I needed. But this week, as I was praying about what this devotional should be about, I got a little bit of a continuation off of that one. So we've started our own little mini series, keeping up the tradition of doing either a scriptural study or a topical study in a series of videos. Okay, so we're going to continue to talk about God's provision, but also about talking to the Lord and asking Him for things. And it was so interesting to me. It didn't occur to me at the time, but when I was recording that video last week, I didn't realize what time of year we're in. We're in December. It's the Christmas season, right? Christmas is coming up. I think it's just a week away or so right now. And I think actually when I post this video, it's going to be Christmas Eve. That's crazy to think about. But it's a time of year when we are asking for things, right? And if you're like me, you do your Christmas shopping early. So when you're buying gifts for people, you're texting them ahead of time, you're calling them, you're like, hey, tell me what you want. You're asking for things all year, or you're asking other people what they want. And it's just a time of thinking about your needs, of thinking about the needs of other people, and making requests for the things that you need. I thought that was such a coincidence that these videos are coming up at this time, And, sometimes there's simple things that you need, easy little requests that you can make to friends and family when they ask you what you want for Christmas, something that's not that big of a deal. And then sometimes there are some bigger things, sometimes there are some things where you put them on the Christmas list and you are just super, super hopeful that somebody is going to come through and get you that big ticket item or that breakthrough thing that you need, right? Christmas is a time of asking and a time of hoping as well, right? It's a time of learning, like I said, thinking about what you need and learning about what other people need. And it's just typically a time where the cares of this world are on our mind, and we are looking for somebody to provide us with something, right? And so on that note, let's get to the scripture of the day, which is going to be in the book of First Peter, right? So all the way over in the New Testament, we're First Peter. We're going to look at chapter 5 and verse 7. Now, in this chapter, in my Bible, I'm reading the ESV, it's entitled Shepherd the Flock of God. So he's talking to Christian leaders, and he's going through several things. He covers a lot of different topics here, but it's overall talking about godly behavior, right? So bunch of different examples, from tithing to how they're talking to people, how they should behave towards one another, all of these types of things. And then in verse 7, he writes this: cast all your cares on him, talking about God, because he cares for you. Again, it's a short one. Let's read it one more time. Cast all your cares on the Lord because he cares for you. Now, at a church that I previously attended when I lived in another state, there was one Sunday where the children's pastor actually came to the main service and was preaching the main service. And, children's pastors are typically very, very illustrative with their examples that they give and the stories that they tell. And so she came up to the pulpit and she was talking on this scripture from First Peter. And she came up with a fishing rod, right? Because the Bible uses that word, cast. And so she gave this demonstration of, the Bible is telling you to cast your cares upon the Lord. It's not just saying take it in your hands and then just kind of put it in his hands and then just sit there and watch it and, all that kind of stuff. And she had the fishing pole, didn't have a hook on it, thankfully, but she just cast it as far to the other end of the sanctuary as she could. And she's like, this is what it means. Take the things that you care about and just throw it as far as you can out of your own hands into the Lord's hands. And I never forgot that illustration. And as I thought about it more, I made this really interesting connection to that word and to Peter himself. I mean, he's the one who wrote the scripture, and Peter was a fisherman. So if anybody was going to know about casting, it would have been Peter. Now, Peter wasn't out there with a rod and a line, right? We know from stories, even within the Bible, as well as just history, that fishermen, particularly professional fishermen like he was, they used to fish with nets. So they would have these big nets that they would wad up, they would fold them up, and then they would literally, with both hands, just take and throw them out into the water. Right? They would throw them out into the water, spread it as broadly as they could, and then they just let it sink. And you wouldn't be able to see it. They would just have weights on the end, and it would just sink, and they would sit there in their boats waiting for the provision to come up in the nets that they had cast out, right? And so with that in mind, and also going back to what I said at the beginning of this video, this is the time of year where you're talking to other people about the things that you need, right? My question for you today is, who are you casting your net on, right? Who are you casting your net on? Because I think, again, about the story in the Bible where Jesus first meets Peter, right? He tells Peter to cast his nets on the other side of the boat, right? He had been out fishing all night long, and he had not caught anything. Now, if you're out fishing all night long, maybe it was just because it was his job, but he might have been in a tough spot, right? Like I said, it's his career. He needs some money. He's fishing all night long. He hasn't caught a single thing. Now, obviously, Peter cares an awful lot about catching fish because he needs to take care of himself. He needs to take care of his family. We know he had a wife, right? He needs to take care of his mother-in-law who was sick at the time. We know that from the story too. So Peter has a lot of cares, and he's out there in his boat all night long, and he hasn't caught a single thing. He's casting his cares basically into the water in his own strength, just trying to make ends meet for himself. But when he meets Jesus, he says, Lord, I haven't caught a thing all night. But when Jesus commands him to cast his nets on the other side, he obeys the Lord, and he casts his net at the command of Christ. And Jesus is the one who filled his nets. So if there's something that you're needing this year, this holiday season, this time when you're full of hope, you're full of expectation, maybe there's something that you really need that you're praying for, and you're hoping that your mom really comes through with that great gift, or that your spouse really comes through, and you are casting your cares upon other people in the hopes that they are going to provide you with what you need. No, that's not what the Bible tells you to do. The Bible never tells you to cast your cares upon any particular person at all. It only says, cast your cares upon the Lord because he cares for you. So, like piggybacking off of the last week's video, talking about asking the Lord for things. This might be something that you need to be provided for, right? Maybe your care or your burden is something that you physically need in your life. Like it is an item that you could go out and buy, something like that. Maybe it's something else. Okay. Maybe there's something that you're hoping for this year to get, like in your own two hands, but not because you really need that thing in your own two hands. Maybe you're hoping it's going to fill some sort of void, some sort of gap in your life. Maybe there's something emotional, something spiritual that you need to be taken care of, and you're looking for a person to fulfill that. You're looking for an item to fulfill that. You're looking for a person to buy you the item to fulfill that, something like that. And you're casting your nets out onto other people. But that's not what the Bible tells you to do. It says to cast all of your cares, take them, wad them up like that big old net, and just throw them onto the Lord because he cares about you. And I'm here to tell you that no matter what happens this Christmas, right, whether you get the gifts that you need or the things that you wanted or the things that you were hoping for or not, right, the Lord cares for you. So don't cast your net onto a person. Do not cast your nets onto an item. Cast your net of all of your cares and all of your burdens onto the Lord and just let it sink to where you can't even see it anymore. And the only time that you're going to know to start pulling that care back up is when you start getting your boat dragged because the net's so full of the Lord's provision for you. Right? So there's my encouragement to you this holiday season. Make sure that everything that you're hoping for, everything that you care about, every burden that you have, talk to the Lord about it. And don't just talk to him about it and then walk away heavy laden. Talk to him about it and leave it on him. He cares about you. He's going to get it settled. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you next week. Bye.